Right, just looking at the number of minutes that we're late, and of course we are sincerely apologizing for that. And it is Debate 4-on-1. We are on air right now, and the purpose of this particular program is to have conversations around various issues that affect us in every particular way. And of course, if it is affecting us, we put it on the table and create a platform where we get to debate these issues with one goal of moving those conversations forward and getting solutions to those particular issues. My name, as always, is Eugene Anangwe. You can get in touch with us at Debate4on1, that's the Twitter handle, or you can tweet me directly at I'm Eugene Anangwe. Please remember to add the hashtag Debate4on1. It helps us to mobilize your tweets. And today on the program, we'll be looking at the ongoing African Union Summit that is happening right here in Kigali, Rwanda. More so an analytical program it is today. We want to highlight the theme and of course the expectations that you may be having out there. And we've posted a poll on our Twitter handle at Debate4on1. Go there, take part, and of course at the end of the program we'll go out and check which person voted where or what particular, how the voting happened there. So let me introduce our panelists on the program. He's not a new guy on this particular show. He's none other than Ephraim Rwamwenje, the outgoing Kigali Shapers curator. Thank you for joining us on Debate 4-on-1.
Thank you for having me.
The ongoing AU Summit, big for you, I'm sure, especially looking at your campaign of the Visa-Free Africa.
Exactly.
We'll talk more about that in the course of the program. Also with us is Moses Opobo. Thank you for joining us on the program. And you write a lot on the New Times. I've seen your articles concerning Rwanda's, conference tourism. So you'll be sharing with us your thoughts on the ongoing summit. Asante for joining us. And with us is Ethan, who's also a journalist. He's attended the summit. He's watching it closely. But of course, he's got views on that. Thank you for joining us, Ethan, again.
My pleasure.
Right. So if we look at the AU summit, plus, of course, the theme that we have and the relevance of it, 2016, the African Year of Human Rights, but with specific focus on the rights of women. And when we talk about human rights, when people look through the media, some of the things that we see, especially lately, and the conflict, the refugee situation, the inequalities that women continue to face, gender-based violence, one wonders if we are actually on the right track, and if indeed this theme is really relevant to our situation. I'm going to start with Ephraim. If you can just share with us your thoughts on this particular theme vis-a-vis what's happening already in the continent.
Okay. I think when you talk of human rights, you have to understand that even good governance is a human right. Because you as a citizen, you vote. That's a right. And you choose a leader.
Yeah.
And for that, the leader has a responsibility to lead you.
Yeah.
Now, most of the issues that we're facing on the African continent in some of the conflict-stricken areas, or where two people are fighting for power, or one doesn't want to relinquish power, you find out that, and normally it's driven by the citizens, there's an uprising of sorts. It's focused around their rights because they're not getting basic services that the government has ensured them. Stuff like water, stuff like adequate food security, and those are the things that people would say, look, I deserve these. I'm a citizen. I gave my vote for this particular leader, and at least I deserve in some way to be
more than what I'm getting.
Exactly. So I think human rights is the right topic to be discussing because it's overarching, and then we can just now start to break it down into different pillars. We talk of governance, we talk of mobility, we talk of stuff like food security, we talk of access to education. When we focus on women, we talk of security because there's the gender-based violence. There's we have in some countries where there's the genital mutilation, and you see that just different aspects that fall under human rights.
Right.
Yeah.
What about you, Moses? Because one would ask, because when some citizens complain that their rights have been violated, and he says even governance, good governance is actually a right. And when you look at the composition of the people attending the AU summit, especially when you look at the heads of state and of course the heads of governments and their representatives, those who feel violated would be saying, these are the same people, who are denying me my rights. How can they talk about what really affects me. Would there be a bias in there? How do you look at it? Do you also look at it in that picture? Or what would be your thought? What would you tell a person who thinks in that particular line of thought?
Well, I think speaking from Rwanda's experience, Rwanda is always unique in a certain way. When we are talking about the vagaries of African political systems, you find that Rwanda is usually different.
Yes.
It's a country that definitely has, there's a certain national psyche, you know, a certain national pride that, that brings people together when there's a big thing in Rwanda.
Yeah.
Be it African Cup of Nations, be it any visitors that are coming in Rwanda. If you've been in any other East African capitals like Kampala or Kenya, where if like a foreign president is coming, you can even hear some people heckling, you know, like, we don't want the president of this, why is he coming? You know, it's usually refreshingly different in Rwanda, you know. There's this sense that, you know, this is something that is for the national good, you know, and usually when Africans are debating about their leaders, there's this sense in Rwanda that, you know, our context is like refreshingly different. You know, our leadership is not synonymous with those other things that most African governments are.
Yeah, but actually the bullet of the question is, what's the place of the ordinary citizens in such conversations, you know, especially when it comes to their representation, you know, for example, of course, not every leader is getting a thumbs up, you know, from every of their citizens. We have those who feel like, I think my leader or those representing me are not really doing it in the right way possible. And so the question is, when we have this kind of gatherings, what exactly is the place of the ordinary citizen, the common Muturaje? You know, when we have these leaders debating, discussing, conversing, meeting, what is the place of the common citizen here?
Let me take you back to the question you asked, Ephraim, of, you know, how timely this theme specifically is to Africa. I would say we all know the problems that, you know, that have marred Africa, the problems that we have as Africans, especially when it comes to, you know, human rights. And I only wish we could move on from just, you know, discussing and having those coffee breaks and then going back and talking and having resolutions, resolutions that don't mature into actions. You know, I wish we could move from that, you know, that level of discussions to implementing those resolutions that we get from conferences.
So you feel there's a lot of talk than walk?
Yeah, and that's the issue I always have with these international, you know, conferences and international bodies, you know, UN, African Union, and all that. You know, when you look at the issues, the things that are happening in Burundi, the things that are happening in South Sudan, and now, you know, neighboring Congo, we've had issues. You know, the person who wanted to actually to stand for presidency was sentenced to, you know, in absentia to about 25 years or something, or 3 years in prison. You know, these are the issues that you look at it like, sometimes I hate to be African, but I am an African and I can't. So, you know, you heard today that one of the members of the East African Legislative Assembly was assassinated in Burundi. That was so shaming. I was like, why do we even have this summit here? And I'm glad that, okay, Mrs. Dlamini Zuma, you know, confronted the issue, and, you know, and they talked about it, as well as the issues that are happening, the conflicts, the civil war in South Sudan. But I want us to move from that stage of, you know, talking and
coffee breaks, resolutions.
Because if we move from talking, that's when it will also impact the normal citizens, the people who are actually following up this
issue. Ephraim, do you share the same thought? Do you feel that these summits or these events, these big meetings, just talking shops in many situations, and then the implementation part becomes, you know, another thing in the end?
Okay, I'm trying to remain politically correct.
Why?
But
just because
we're talking about politics.
Yes.
But You know, they say the key to any good relationship is communication. My assumption is that when it comes to the AU, you're dealing with so many countries with different complexities in terms of, he even talked of like even differences. Some of them have different narratives, so it gets very hard to classify them and make it easy to manage and say it should be done like this and let's move forward.
But then
so,
if we cannot be able to pinpoint each other and correct each other openly, then we could be lying to ourselves.
So no, that's what I agree with.
As a union.
Exactly. So I personally believe that the starting point is the talk, yes. And are these things talk shops, where talk shows or talk shops where people just come and they sit down and they talk and then they have coffee, then they go back home? I think to a certain extent they are, but I don't think that you could just discount the work that they do and say that there's no action. Obviously, there are challenges to solving issues in Burundi and solving whatever is happening in South Sudan. There's only so much that the AU can do. And that is limited by the fact that at the end of the day, each state is a sovereign nation. It's not governed by the AU. It's not, Dlamini Zuma is not president of Africa. So all they can, it's a body where I would say it's an institution that gives them a platform to discuss amongst themselves as African leaders.
And this is what he doesn't want.
Actually,
he just doesn't want the discussions.
One thing I want us to do, I want this body to do, the African Union Summit, is to just move from having that notion of the international body, you know, to having actions, to even confronting, going against national sovereignty, if possible, to confront. Yes.
Do you think it's the reality?
I personally say that it can't be a reality in the sense that, I'm sorry to sound like a skeptic, but you have to understand that once borders are put around the nation, any person that's coming from outside the nation, even if it's citizens themselves, that is considered an invasion of a sovereign state. Now, if somebody comes in and says, we are going to fight, mind you, let's say there's one country that out of the 54 member states is having issues. If those 53 nations make a decision amongst themselves to help that nation out without the consent of that particular country's government,
It will be a waste of time.
That's grounds for invasion. That's where you have world wars and stuff. Like, not necessarily in the context of a world war, but you're invading a sovereign territory. You cannot necessarily expect a body that has a different mandate to be going into places as opposed to what the government of that particular state,
regardless of how good intended those decisions are.
Exactly.
And then why do you have that body then?
Then let me first bring Moses back here, because at the end of the day, is this where we're going wrong? I mean, are these the things that stop, institutions like AU from taking immediate action, hands-on solutions to some of the issues that are happening in individual African states? Is this the stumbling block, the sovereignty issue? Like, you cannot come here without our consent. You cannot do whatever you've discussed in Kigali without our consent.
Yeah, I definitely, it's sovereignty, as he said. It's usually like, it's hard to decide for another country. There's always going to be that element of the voices from that country have to come out. So I find that the work of the African Union or other world or regional bodies is always inherently constrained. In that, usually they don't have the capacity to, even if it is NATO, which is a big organization, you'll find that they cannot take decisive action when they need to.
But Eugene, let me tell you something. If we are discussing about human rights, and you want to save people from dying or from injustice or whatever it is, then if that country actually allows, goes, it's under a certain rule of an international space, a certain international body, then it has to abide by those rules. It has to protect the citizens. If it can't protect the citizens, let that international body come in and protect the civilian as you sort your political issues.
But he says you might want to come, but if that country refuses, then you will not be able to come. It will be taken as
People are dying.
I agree with him on that point. That at the end of the day, from the get-go, the mandate should have been that at some point the if people do not adhere to a certain letter in terms of the kind of governance and leadership, then these people can step in. But you also have to understand that you're dealing with politics, that geopolitics involved here. 53 other African countries can decide the state of one as per unanimous vote. It doesn't even have to be unanimous vote. It just has to be majority vote. So imagine if I am your enemy, right? And we're two different countries, and I'm able to get majority vote to support your impeachment. Imagine how confused such an organization would be in terms of its mandate.
Hold on a bit, because at the end of the day, most people, Ephraim, Moses, most people are asking, what more are institutions like AU, UN, and other international bodies waiting for to act on these particular specific countries that we're seeing in conflict? You know, we have South Sudan, we have Burundi, which has been in the news, you know, not just yesterday. I mean, there have been various reports since April 2015, and people are asking, what more do you want as evidence or as a sign that now it's time to come and
actually
act?
if African Union wanted to make a point that it's a body that is existing and it has powers, this is the right time to act in Burundi. This is the right time to act in South Sudan.
Do you think this is like easy, easy way to talk? It's just, it seems easy. It's easier said than done from what he says, or
what he says
or it's practical.
is desirable.
Yes,
but it's not very easy to implement. You know, the dynamics of, like, for instance, if you took, for instance, a foreign force to Sudan, South Sudan, or to Burundi, and you try to gauge the consent of the ordinary people, do you think this intervention is, sometimes you would be shocked. As in, the local dynamics of any place will always call for local voices, you know. Of course, it should be in partnership with organizations like AU, but there is no way you can expect a sweeping attack on a country from an organization like AU, you know.
So it will only be like communiques, resolutions,
you know.
So this is
who
what
will answer the question of the people who are saying that international bodies have let us down.
Who should answer that question?
Who should answer
Who should answer?
those international bodies?
No, I don't
because
think so.
on a daily basis, I talk to people from Burundi. And actually, you have no idea how people, were crying and mourning about the death of this lady. You know, we interact with people from South Sudan. You know, they're fed up of this. You understand?
If today, like when we have these elections of the AU commissioners, including the AU Commission chairperson, if they were to say, Ethan, you've been elected as the AUC chairperson, what would you do?
What would I do?
Yes, especially in line with this crisis that we
I'll
see.
make sure that the few, regulations and the rules and, articles that don't give me the power to confront that issue are first,
nullify them.
I nullify them and, adopted, and then we can work on.
So you accept that there could be some strings holding these people? All right.
And I'm pretty sure that some of the heads of state who are not agreeing with the current situation, the passiveness, some of this AU, it's just being passive. It's not being active. And I think some people are being, they're being pushed on the wall. They're like, I wish we could actually act.
Passive and not active. We're going to take a short break, but when we come back, we'll also hear what if you are the one who's picked, or you, Moses, what would you do? Because sometimes it's important to put ourselves in those shoes and see what exactly we'd be able to do. And of course, also when we come back, we talk about the issues of equality and women's rights. And of course, the nice topic that Ephraim would be happy to make some noise about, and that's the visa-free Africa when we return, all right? So stay with us, keep tweeting, talk to us at Debate411 or at Eugene Anangwe. If you cannot be able to add those tags, just put the hashtag Debate411. We'll be able to follow that particular comment and we'll sample them in the course of the program. We have a poll that we have posted out there on our Twitter handle at Debate411. Of course, we're asking you whether you believe that the African Union can come up with a solution to the crisis in Burundi, and of course also in South Sudan and other parts of Africa where there's a lot of conflict. Talk to us. We'll sample them in a very short while. When we return, stay with us.
Good morning, class. Morning, teacher. Umeza mute? Okay.
Look, you know, in my previous school, what do you want with my girlfriend?
Alex. Alex, don't
Stay
be
out of
stupid.
this.
Alex, don't be stupid. Nashaka ibyitaye hasi. Ya bro. Urumoki.
Bibero directrice. Directrice mu biro.
Zana ziri cyana cy'igicucu gusa.
Nyagasani Mana, ndakwinginze umbabarire rwose. Ndashaka ko dusohokana akugurira ikivuguto.
Yewe nyine nakwemera ko tugenda kugura ikivuguto uri bwiyahure.
Ndabiki arayanga nashaka ntumbikire ariko mbikire isosi.
Imbere tugende. Mumuzanire aragutse akabacikana. Mumuzanire nonaha. Beki ndagukunda. Beki bitaye.
Akunda kubwira ikintu ntabwo mbizi. Ntabwo nshaka. Beki ndagukunda nzakujyana hanze ugurira ikivuguto. Ya injyana y'umujinya.
Right, thank you so much for still being with us. It is Debate 4-1. My name, as always, is Eugene Anangwe. We've asked you on our Twitter handle @Debate411, will leaders meeting in Rwanda for AU summit solve conflict in South Sudan, Burundi, and others? You just share with us your thoughts. Kindly add the hashtag Debate411. And as we speak right now, the options that we had was yes, not at all, or situations are tricky. And so far, the yes vote has 8%, and not at all, 79%, and situations are tricky, 13%. So at the end of the show, we'd be happy to see where you stand on this particular issue. And of course, we'll also be debating this right on the program. Ethan, why do you think that, very few people are actually optimistic that there will be a solution out here?
That's what I was telling you when we started, that people have always, they have this perception about the international communities to just talk have resolutions, and that marks the end of the day, and then they go back and wait for another term of.
So they have lost hope.
They have lost hope in this until they change, from just being a notion of an international community to being an active body that solves people's problems, not just government's problems, but people's problems. Because they're just there for people, not for government, not for this president or the other. They're there for people, representing the views of the people.
Right. In many instances, the AU as a body has been criticized by a few people that it's just a club of African heads of state who probably just mostly look up for their interests. And when you look at some of the comments that people have been sending, and of course this particular picture of this voting situation, we have 12% who are saying the situation is actually tricky. They might want to help, they might be able to help, but it's a tricky situation. How do you analyze this kind of thought by people?
A funny thing that we don't realize at some point is that these international bodies that we look to for help have their own agendas. And it's never, we as citizens or we as the people, at no point should we ever expect something from them. I think one thing that I learned was that these institutions are normally there as their duty is to look at a situation that has happened, they're a historical institution, if I can put it like that, assess what went wrong, prepare, like you said, a resolution or a charter and say, this is what's going to help us, this is what's going to help us from repeating the same mistakes again. But they are not an active body in actively getting involved in the heat of the moment. And they're kind of like that teacher, when you're fighting, they don't come in, but after you're finished beating each other, then they come, then they tell you, okay, now you're in trouble, and stuff like that. And I genuinely believe that when people say that the situation is tricky, and the perception of the situation is tricky, and they believe that it's not as easy, it's based on the premise that when you look at the mandate of such institutions, when you look at the track record of such institutions, you realize that it's not cut and dry. In situations where you would think an international body would not get involved, they get involved. And then in situations where you think they should get involved, they don't get involved. And then people would argue and say sometimes they have economic interests, and in other situations there are members of the part of this institution that are more influential than others to make sure that something happens in certain environments and in certain situations than in others. So that's the perception. And I think on a personal level, I would say that if we keep expecting the AU, institutions like the AU and the UN to participate or play an active role in solving some of the issues in conflict-stricken areas,
we might never make it.
We're never going to make any progress because these institutions are not designed to do that.
Then they should be dissolved.
But he says they're not supposed to be expected to be able to do
Look
this.
at the issue of the history of Rwanda, 1994 genocide.
But what's the place of civil society? What's the place of,
even the citizens themselves, what role are they playing?
No, citizens, for example, talking about the issue of conflicts, citizens are not armed to confront the people who are
committing atrocities.
Yes, you understand. So I wanted to take you back to the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi here. UN, was supposed to come and intervene and take side of the people, of the interests of the people, protect people from being massacred. They didn't do that. Unfortunately, some of them packed their dogs in the cars and left people to die. Look at the issue in Burundi. African Union has always wanted to come and take charge of the situation, save people from being killed on a daily basis. And then the president says, we don't want you here. And then he brings a few group of extremists and young boys, and they probably gave them like 10,000 Burundian francs, and they went on the streets and they're like, we don't want you here, now go to Shaka, these things. It really annoys me that if they can't take action, then they should be dissolved, and we'll live on bilateral relations, Uganda, Rwanda, and something.
Listen, it's really interesting also to bring on board some of the people who are actually tweeting here. And we have Agaba Georges on Twitter who's saying, what type of conflict is in Burundi and South Sudan? Genocide or what? I guess leadership should be changed in Africa. Sort of, he feels some of these leaders have just totally failed, and there's need for particular change in this particular situation. Then we have another one from Regan, who says, of course, this issue of South Sudan and Burundi should get solution from this African Union summit, because none will come out, no one will come out to build it for us. So I think the comment here is that actually Africans, these heads of state, these African leaders are the ones who actually should be able to come up with a solution. There is no one from the West or any other place who can be able to come to sort this particular situation. Quick one, just the same question I'd asked based on the poll results. What position do you see, you know, the citizens of these individual countries when it comes to situations like this, when they have full expectations, and at the end of the day they just give up and say, you know what, it's just complicated. I had expectations, but now I've lost my psyche in this.
Yeah, I think we should just, like they have already said, we should just stop wishful thinking and know that these organizations, you know, it's like we all have jobs, corporate jobs, but there is no employer who will give you a salary that will solve all your problems. They just give you that basic minimum. So I guess it's the same with these organizations. They do the basic minimum, which is not even in terms of action, but in terms of deliberations, in terms of let this that has already happened not happen again. They will not come up with a firefighting approach when a house is on fire. You know, so you know, just like, for instance, just like we don't want the foreign or international community to interfere with our affairs, whenever African countries are having, say, an election, or, you know, sometimes you hear sentiments like, we don't want people to teach us
how to go about our business.
Yeah, so it should not be a situation of fair weather, like we run to African Union when we need help. Then at a certain time we're like, we don't need, we are sovereign.
Exactly.
We should just take one route, you know, the brave route, and know that, you know, at the end of the day, you must solve your own problems.
That's true.
And that route should not be
what the
the route
president
of killing people.
But then again, look at the hands of the African leaders, and of course even the institution itself, the AU, because close to 90% of its budget that handles peace and security and conflict resolution issues is actually financed by the Western countries.
The irony.
Right. So do you think whatever is going on right in Kigali, do you see a solution coming out from here? And what would be the way forward? Because this can be seen as one of the stumbling blocks in Africans dealing with this situation by themselves.
He said, these people are not firefighters. They don't come up with active plans. So if you ask me, they won't have a solution for what's currently happening, but they'll probably have what shouldn't happen, like in the field, like
what caused the war that happened 10 years ago.
Perfect. So that's the kind of solution we're going to look at.
They have a more academic approach.
Exactly. And you know, let's be honest, and maybe allow me to be a bit propagandish with what I'm about to say. You know, divide and rule was one of the most brilliant principles as per the people who implemented it, because by dividing us into sovereign states, it makes it very hard for us to work together to solve our problems collectively. Each person feels, like he said, there are moments where we use our borders and our sovereignty to protect ourselves, and then there are moments where we also play on the fact, no, but we're Africans, we should be united and stuff like that. And those double standards are what are killing us in the sense that we are failing to progress. Every time we want to propose a solution, and it's difficult for one person, they say, no, sovereign state. Then when they are looking out for their interest and they need help, then they come and say, we want this. So I genuinely believe no active solution that's going to come out of this, probably just a way,
Now, let's keep that, because at the end of the day, I think the die is cast, and of course the jury is also out, because there's mixed reaction. You have your disappointments when it comes to when they say we cannot be able to do this.
Are you going to watch people die?
This is actually a very situation, of course, from how all of you are reasoning. But of course, at the end of the show, let's see how the polling goes. But let's see. There's a point here which Junior Sabena says the anticipated AU passport project to be fully implemented as planned. No ifs, no buts. So for him, this is what he's expecting from this particular summit. And of course, it brings us to that issue of the integration and this African passport. And the anticipation that we all have. At the moment, you have a campaign, of course, not just you, but most young people from across the globe, the shapers. Do you feel a sense of, you know, lack of belonging when at the end of the day it had to start from the leaders? You know, because we know it's not everybody who's going to have it, but it had to start there. I mean, how does that make you feel as a young person?
Okay.
Who's pushing this agenda?
So you asked him a question about if he was made chairperson at this AU summit, what he would do. If you asked me what an active solution would be for the issues that we're having, is increased interdependence between our states. In that sense, citizens in Rwanda will look out for the interests of citizens in Burundi, and we would lobby our leaders to take action, and to be the same thing if there's interdependence. Now that interdependence cannot exist when we are unable to move and work in each other's countries freely. And we have had to, I would say us as young people, as the shapers, we are passionate about the whole visa-free Africa thing. And when we heard the African e-passport, and we're like, oh great, this is gonna... Then we actually sat down and we looked at the, because we actually for a very long time we thought, we're like, when after they announced it, we're like, well done, we've managed to get a call for action on our campaign. But then when you actually look at the fine print of this Africa e-passport, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, because I need to travel now, not in 2020. I need to travel tomorrow. I need to travel and solve this whole visa issue can be solved but just somebody sitting by their desk and making a decision that, okay, we're gonna just allow people to come into our country. Because it's not about the other country, it's about your country and deciding amongst yourselves. And then also making sure that you have the structure and the framework to be able to handle the influx of people when they do come in. Right. Rwanda did it. Ghana has done it. I think Senegal is also one of the countries that has pushed it. We were excited when Namibia announced it, but we only found out it was for diplomats. So, but the idea is that we need it today. We're not going to wait for 2020, and we even said we're not going to wait for 2063, because that's part of the agenda 2063. So we are pushing for a visa-free Africa in the sense that as young people, these same solutions that we are seeking, our brothers are somewhere else and they need help, and we can't go help them because we have to apply through an embassy where the people in the embassy cannot even contact the government back home because of whatever conflict is happening there. I'm just giving that as an example.
So you feel it's still a raw deal? It's
still a raw deal. Like the African e-passport is, read the fine print. It's not a solution. It's not like the solution we've been waiting for. It's half a solution, but I think that we still need to push to get the full solution. The full solution is not as difficult as they try to make it seem.
Right. Moses, 2063, he wants it now because he knows by 2063 he may be there, but of course not as strong as he is now that he wants to travel all around. What does that make you feel?
Well, like we said already, most of the things are talked by politicians at summits to create that feel-good factor, you know. But you know that things don't always move at that
particular pace
of summits and conferences, what's deliberated there. But for me, I would love to see, like, when it comes to the ordinary citizens, I'm sure most of them don't even know what a passport is. African leaders should be talking about cheap forms of transport. Inter-border kind of transport, you know, more than
visas, visa-free and e-cards.
Because I think people who go for visas don't need help from governments. They usually have their money, you know. Yeah, so we want to see more policies on, I mean,
But I'll give you a simple example of a visa, because we're talking of all kinds of visas. We're talking of tourist visas, travel visas, but even work visas. You know, you're a young Ugandan business entrepreneur who wants to invest in Rwanda, for example. At some point for you to register the business, you need to have a business visa. If you want to work here, you have to have a work visa. You know, these are and those things can be counterproductive to integration, to development, to solving some of our social issues. So it's just, if it's not necessary, let's remove the red tape.
Right. Ethan, a quick one, just if you can just pour in your thoughts. If we can do it for our diplomats, if we can do it for our heads of states, why can't we do it for our ordinary citizens? Your thought on that?
It will take me to the issues that we're having with South Africa.
Yeah.
I mean, I know these things, and I have to say them as I quote our foreign affairs minister, Louise Meshiki, during the recent press conference that she was talking about the readiness of Rwanda towards African Union Summit. She was asked about the issues of visa, especially to the people who are traveling. You know, actually the normalizations of the bilateral relations between Rwanda and South Africa. She said that things are normalizing on a good pace, but a few things that need to be worked on, especially the visa processes and all the things of the ordinary Rwandans who are traveling to South Africa. And then it drove me back to the issue of the visa-free Africa. And I'm like, really? Why do you give a diplomat, someone visa because it's diplomatically right, and then you deny someone who has businesses, someone who can actually, make you earn some money, who can bring revenues to your country, and don't give them the rights, the free, the seamless access to your, into your country, making it easy for them to move into and from your country. Why we are Africans, and these are the things that we need to. People, the delegates, people who are attending, the participants of the African Union Summit, this is something they meant to, these are some of the issues.
These are the announcements you're expecting to hear.
Yes, I want to, actually, because when I look at Rwanda, I might sound a bit political, but I'm right, because we've seen things working here in Rwanda than anywhere else, because I've been, in some different countries. If we've come to Rwanda, and we know Rwanda is a country of actions, more of action than speeches, then we need to hear more of action, especially on issues that has to do with visa-free Africa, the mobility of people across the continent, as well as the issues of conflict resolution as well.
Yeah, there's a tweet here which says, hey, it's a very good idea about passport-free in Africa, but do you really know what will happen to weak countries? Rebel attacks. So we still have that particular mindset that you are against in the last debate, that we might have security and insecurity issues. So could this be some of the things that are hindering us from going in this direction?
There are so many things hindering us from going in this direction.
Yeah.
But there are so many things hindering you from waking up in the morning and leaving your house.
Yeah.
Like let's take for example on an individual level, there are so many ways you can die.
Yeah.
Sorry to sound so grave, but you could slip, you could choke on your breakfast.
For you, it's still a non-issue.
The idea is that sometimes when you base a decision on fear, instead of looking at fear, coming up with a way to reduce the risk associated with the fear, and moving forward, instead you paralyze yourself based on the fear of security. And I'll say this again, interdependence is the solution to some of these conflicts.
Yeah.
It goes beyond even just a fun thing for me to travel. It goes beyond that. When we depend on one another as African citizens, you find out that we will
protect each other.
Exactly. I'll care more about what's happening next door than what's happening locally, because I have some interest there.
Yeah.
And that's why I think visa-free Africa, it goes beyond just the ideology of travel. It's about changing the social fabric of our communities and how we interact with one another as African citizens.
Right. Awesome. We have a few minutes to go, but it's important for us to touch on this one, because there's a very key thing that will also be happening apart from the launch of this e-passport, African e-passport. That will be the election. of the commissioners and, of course, the AU Commission chairperson. And we have someone coming from your land.
Dr. Speciosa Wandera Kaziba.
Yes, and apart from him, we also have Botswana's 65-year-old Pelonomi, who's the candidate from the SADC region, and of course we also have a 51-year-old Equatorial Guinea Foreign Minister Agapito Mokoe. Without looking like we're speculating, where do we see this? Because there will be also an issue of lobbying, but my key issue here is looking at the age of these contestants or these people who will be vying here. Where does this leave the young people, the youth? Because from several blogs we had seen some people suggesting, saying we need 2.0 of Dr. Zuma. We need at least what she did, but a younger version of this. Where does this leave the young people? Average age, you need 60 years. We have 65-year-old and we have a 51-year-old. Ephraim, why are you not going there?
Actually, well, before we even get there, I wish you that the elections are going to happen.
Okay.
So, this is something.
But I've also heard my own version of that.
Yeah, so
I know
assuming that they'll happen,
yeah.
based on the official communication that we have, without speculations, how does that make you feel as a young person? Because at the end of the day, probably this is what detaches the young people from these institutions. Yeah. When they have no one they can relate with, either age-wise or, does this concern you at all?
It does, but honestly speaking, things to do with politics, age also matters at some point. Experience matters so much. And so I believe someone who is 50-something, 51, the guy from Equatorial Guinea, this is the he's somewhere in between the old and the youth. So that's the kind of age that we should be looking to, in future, especially for the East Africa as well, not just the African Union, but also for the East Africa. Because actually one of the issues that we're having in these conflicts is because people are still living in, I'm sorry to say, in the old age system. In the system that has not exposed them to the world.
So in other words, you have no reservations. You feel the more older the person, the more mature they're able to handle these
as long
issues.
as they're exposed to the world.
Yeah, you agree also? Just a yes or no? You agree or you don't agree?
Yes and no.
Come 50-50.
I know that that's a huge disadvantage for youth always when it comes to
positions.
Many things are tied to age, not just politics, not just leadership. In almost all traditional professions and career, people think,
the older you are, the more mature you are. Very briefly, yes.
I kind of agree. There's a certain level of constraint you can practice when you have a certain amount of maturity. Now, obviously, maturity is not limited to age, so I wouldn't put an age and say an average age of this, but I would say you would want, at least you would want somebody who has some a decent track record to say that, oh, this person has the capabilities of leading this organization in the right direction with the interest of all the stakeholders considered, especially the citizens of the continent. That's my 2 cents on that.
That's your 2 cents on that. And of course, for me, I would ask a question and say, so those people who always say...
I was not endorsing the 51-year-old.
You're not endorsing
but I was looking at the age.
The age issue. Because they keep saying, you are the youth of tomorrow. And then others come saying, no, we're the youth of today. And we need these positions. So I think, as he says, a matter of not age, but also experience. And we as young people can prove that we can be able to do these things regardless. I wish I was able to.
Should we vote for you?
I'm not vying. My name is not in the list.
Are you sure?
But of course, it will be very interesting if the vote will happen to see which particular region is going to go with this one, because sometimes I'm told there's a lot of lobbying going on. But at the end of the day, as we finish the show, the vote as we speak right now at 10 is, and we had asked you, will leaders meeting in Rwanda for AU summit solve conflict in South Sudan, Burundi and others? And the yes is 8%. And then not at all has actually gone up by 1%. We have 81%, not just 1%. The last time it was
2%,
70, yes,
yeah.
79. And the situation is tricky is at 12%. Thank you so much for the vote. Thank you so much for coming through. And of course, it's important for us to keep talking about these particular issues every time, every day. And of course, to our leaders out there, if you're watching or if you have a friend, of course, their parents as well, if one of them is your parent, show them this tweet, let them understand the situation on the ground, and let's see how we can solve more of these issues that affect us on a day-to-day basis. We'll see you again on Wednesday, same time, same place, with another particular topic to have a debate on. Keep talking on our Twitter handle @debate411, @Eugene Anangwe, #debate411. Goodbye for now.